Please join me in welcoming America's leading Vaticanist, the man who popes don't need an introduction to, our Capuchin rooted, and our renowned journalist, Mr. John L. Allen.
No, not so far. Hello there. How is everybody? Now, listen, Father Charles, with his customary graciousness, said a lot of nice things about me, but what he didn't quite tell you with any level of detail is what I actually do for a living. And so I thought I might start tonight with a little bit about the work that I do on a day-to-day basis, because that might help explain the perspective that I'm going to bring to you here tonight. So I am what the Italians call a Vaticanista. That means it is my day-to-day work to track the affairs of this 108-acre island of ecclesial life in the heart of urban Rome that we call the Vatican. Now, that means a lot of things. What that means, for instance, is that when I am in Rome, virtually every day I am in and out of the Vatican on some bit of business. But to be honest with you, most of what one learns in Rome about the Vatican doesn't actually happen inside the Vatican. It happens over lunches and dinners with Vatican people. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I know it is a real burden of my office that most of my work is done over lengthy expense account Italian lunches and dinners. But I want you to know I am over there carrying the cross for all of you. Okay? Now, my job also means that I move when the Pope moves. So when the Pope takes a foreign trip, typically, well, not anymore. I'm now running my own news agency, so somebody else does this for me. But for the better part of 20 years, when the Pope would take a trip, I would go with him. So I took about 60 trips with St. John Paul II. I took all 21 of the foreign trips of Pope Benedict XVI. And I took the first few foreign trips of Pope Francis. And I want to tell you a story to illustrate the perspective all of this gives you that is located on one of these papal trips. This particular trip took place in 2002. It was John Paul II's trip to Azerbaijan. Now, Azerbaijan is an overwhelmingly Muslim nation. It is largely Shia Muslim. At the time, there were a grand total of 114 Catholics in Azerbaijan. I actually did the math. It would have been 4 times less expensive to fly all of them to Rome than to bring the Pope to them. But that, of course, wasn't the point. And so off we went. Now, when the Pope travels, he does so in a kind of unique dual capacity. The Pope is a head of state because the Holy See is a sovereign entity under international law. It has diplomatic relations with 193 nations. He is also, however, the head of the Catholic Church. So when he arrives, he is welcomed twice. First, in a very formal setting by the president or the prime minister or the queen or whoever happens to be in charge. And then secondly, in a less formal setting, he is welcomed on behalf of the local Catholic community. And this is usually done by the local bishop or whoever. But if it is a very small Catholic country, as Azerbaijan is, he may be welcomed by his own nuncio, that is the papal ambassador in that country, who by tradition always holds the rank of archbishop. So on this occasion, John Paul II was welcomed by the local nuncio. Now, at the time, this was a very kindly, elderly Italian Monsignore, and he had that remarkable Italian oratorical capacity of just going on and on and on. And the miracle of it was without ever saying anything. You would be listening to these sentences in Italian and asking yourself, where the hell are the verbs? Because nothing ever seemed to happen in any of these constructions. Now, by the way, I actually clocked this greeting because I was in the press pool for this event. This greeting took 42 minutes. ladies and gentlemen, and the Pope was only going to be in the country 24 hours. I mean, at a certain point, we thought John Paul would be back in Rome before this guy was done welcoming him to Baku. Now, as I say, I was in the press pool. I was at the end of one row of seats. Immediately across a very narrow aisle from me was the Vatican Seguito. That's the entourage, the cardinals and other officials who travel with the Pope. What that meant is that I was basically cheek by jowl with this very senior Vatican cardinal, a guy I know very well. I've interviewed him many times over the years. And I could tell, as this oration was winding on, that the cardinal was becoming increasingly frustrated. Right? You can tell these things, right? Because, like, his breathing was becoming more labored, and he started checking his watch with great regularity, and veins were throbbing on his forehead. And at one point, I thought the poor guy was going to burst. So I leaned across the aisle, and I said to him, "Cardinal, what do you think?" Now, there was this nanosecond of hesitation where he was calculating, should I say this, should I not say it? But it was obvious he needed to get this off his chest. So he leans into the aisle, and in this sotto voce fashion, looking up at this Italian Monsignore going on and on without saying anything, the cardinal whispered to me, "You realize some Italian village is missing its idiot." True story. Now, in addition to being a once-in-a-career punchline, I think this story makes a valuable point, which is the following. People in the Catholic Church very rarely live up to their stereotypes. The Catholic Church is a 1.3 billion fellowship of faith scattered across every nook and cranny of the planet. It is wildly, riotously diverse. And for every stereotype you think you may possess about some subset of that church, whether it is Vatican officials, whether it is bishops, whether it is women religious, whether it is theologians, no matter who it is, without breaking a sweat, in 20 seconds I could name you at least a dozen people who don't live up to those stereotypes, who are in fact far different than we would assume they are, given their station in life and the category that they occupy. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, I think what my job has taught me to do is appreciate all of the colors in between the black and the white. And tonight, we are here to celebrate, in my opinion, the most special, the most distinguished, the most remarkable of those colors. And that color is, of course, brown, the color of the Capuchin Franciscans. Now, the one piece of useful advice I got about this presentation was keep it short. So, in the words of that great classic of the American cinema, Smokey and the Bandit, I have a long way to go and a short time to get there. So I am going to do everything I can to be brief. In the words of King Henry VIII to each of his wives, I will not keep you long. But my agenda here tonight is the following. I have an introduction. I have 3 greetings. I have 2 professional observations about the Capuchins, and then 1 personal observation. Let me begin with the introduction. There is a VIP among us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that I wish to present to you. May I ask Elise Harris to stand, please? Elise is a very distinguished journalist. She covered the Vatican for 5 years with the Catholic News Agency, and she now writes for my news agency, Crux. But far more important for our purposes, she is the woman I'm going to marry in January. I explained to Elise that marrying me meant marrying into the extended Capuchin family, and believe it or not, she assented. And so she is here tonight. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, there are also several members of Elise's family here tonight. You may bump into them later. If you do, I would give you these instructions. If you like tonight's presentation, please tell them how great I was. If you do not, please keep it to yourself, because to be quite honest with you, their approval of me right now is fairly tenuous, and I do not need you screwing up the deal. Okay? All right, that's our introduction. Greetings. You may or may not be aware of this, but at the moment, there are actually 2 Capuchin cardinals in the world. This is the first time in the history of the Capuchin order that they have had 2 princes of the church at the same moment. The great thing about Rome is that you run into these guys on a fairly regular basis. And so quite recently, I had the opportunity to meet, for the first time, the new Capuchin cardinal of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He is Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Besungu, and he was created as a cardinal on October 5th in a consistory by Pope Francis. By the way, this is the appropriate ecclesiastical vocabulary. We say that a pope creates cardinals, which leads to the cynical old Roman joke that only God and the Pope can make something out of nothing. However, Cardinal Ambongo, I promise you, is not nothing. Cardinal Ambongo, for a long time, has been a tribune of the suffering people of the Congo. He has been a voice for justice. He has been a voice for equality. He has been a voice against corruption. He is, in many ways, the hope of his people. And when I saw Cardinal Ambongo in Rome, I asked him if he would be willing to send a special greeting to the Brown Robes benefit here tonight. So I ask you to give a quick listen to Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo of Congo.
Io vorrei ringraziare, esprimere tutta la mia gratitudine a tutti quelli che ci danno la mano per poter continuare questa lotta per il bene del nostro popolo. Io vivo in Congo, ma sono anche sostenuto dai frati Cappuccini della provincia di Pennsylvania che ci mandano ogni mese anche delle intenzioni delle messe che aiuta i preti a continuare la loro missione. Io vorrei ringraziare tutti quelli che ci aiutano partendo dai nostri confratelli che sono Stati Uniti, perché tramite loro sono tutti i cappuccini del mondo, tutto il mondo, che sono aiutati.
I need to tell you that this took place in the Vatican press office after Cardinal Ambongo had stood there for an hour and a half taking questions in multiple languages from journalists from all over the world. He was obviously exhausted and anxious to get going. But when I told him, I am not here for an interview, I am here to ask you to give a greeting to the Capuchins, he said, by all means, let's roll. All right, now the other Capuchin cardinal of the world is, of course, a fellow American, Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston. Believe it or not, Elise and I were out walking our pug the other day when we ran into Cardinal O'Malley on a Roman sidewalk. And I asked Cardinal O'Malley if he too would be willing to send a greeting to the Brown Rome benefit. He too, despite being exhausted and in a hurry, said, of course, I'd be delighted to do that. So let's give a listen to Cardinal Sean O'Malley.
Missions in the States and around the world.
Well, we're very grateful to all the friends of our community and our fraternity who are stepping up to support us, and send a great greeting and many blessings from Rome. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you, but I'm sure that you'll enjoy the evening very much. Many blessings on all of you. Peace and goodness to all.
All right, so those are our two video greetings. We have a third greeting. This is a viva voce. This is in person. Can I please ask Brother Mark Schenk to come back up for a moment? This is utterly unrehearsed, ladies and gentlemen. Mark has absolutely no idea what is happening right now. So Mark, you probably have no memory of this at all. But when I arrived in Rome as a cub reporter many moons ago, I knew you were there. And of course, we had the TMP connection. So I asked if you would join us for lunch. You came out to our apartment on the Via Gregorio Settimo. We had just gotten there. We had no idea about anything. We asked, where should we go? And you said, well, I saw a Sardinian place in the bus as I was coming down the street, just up the street. Why don't we go there? That Sardinian place is called Del Sardo. After that, I began going to that restaurant. It basically became my refectory. It is a classic Roman mom-and-pop restaurant. It is run by a family. The owner is a guy named Giovanni Pietro Figas. His wife is Leona. His daughter is Barbara, who waits the tables, and his son is Pietro, who cooks back in the kitchen. They have become my adopted Roman family. And it has become my tradition that every time I arrive in Rome, I eat there first, and every time I'm about to leave Rome, for whatever reason, I eat there last. So Elise and I ate at Del Sardo last Wednesday, in keeping with my tradition. And I told this story to Giovanni Pietro. I said to him, I am going to be seeing the guy who introduced me to this restaurant 22 years ago and who basically created the friendship that we have benefited from and that has meant the world to us for these many years. Giovanni Pietro said, I have to give that man a 2020 Del Sardo calendar replete with photography of Pope Francis. And because this is Italy, I have to give him a kiss.
I would have preferred a lifetime membership to the restaurant, but anyway.
We'll see what we can do. All right. I want to give you, in the time I have left, I want to give you two professional observations about the Capuchins, born of my experience of covering the Catholic Church globally for more than 20 years. The theme of our gathering tonight is without distinction, and as you have heard, that is a quotation from the Capuchin constitutions. It refers in the first place to relationships among the Capuchins themselves, but it has become the spirit of the order. And it really refers to their attitude towards the entire world, that they treat all of us, no matter our class, no matter our race, no matter our place in life. They treat us without distinction as daughters and sons of God, beloved children of God, deserving of their last best efforts. And I'm going to tell you two stories, I think, that illustrate the point. One, I want to talk to you about two Italians I know who carry holy cards of Padre Pio in their wallets. Padre Pio, of course, formerly St. Pio of Pietrelcina, is the most famous, arguably the most famous Capuchin of all time, certainly the most famous Capuchin of the 20th century. He is a mystic who bore the stigmata, a legendary confessor. He is, in Italy above all, but throughout the world, I think, but certainly above all in Italy, he is an icon of compassion for suffering. He is that man of God who will always be there, tirelessly, for anyone who is bent, broken, hurt, confused, disoriented, in need of a touch of mercy, in need of a touch of God's love. The first Italian I know who carries a holy card of Padre Pio is the Prime Minister of the country, Giuseppe Conte. Prime Minister Conte has an uncle who was a Capuchin. His uncle Fedele was a Capuchin friar who was essentially a kind of aid to Padre Pio at his shrine at San Giovanni Rotondo in the south of the country in his later years. He would help pilgrims who were coming through to go to one of Padre Pio's masses or who would be there lining up for him to hear their confession. And through his uncle, a young Giuseppe Conte came to know Padre Pio. When he went to law school, he dedicated his legal studies to Padre Pio. When he was asked in 2016 to become the prime minister of the country, he dedicated his service to Padre Pio. Every day, he ensures that there are 5 or 10 minutes in his day when he can take out that holy card, say a brief prayer to Padre Pio, and ask that his public service be worthy of the legacy of Padre Pio. That's one Italian I know who is attached to this famous Capuchin. The other is the doorman in my former apartment building in Rome. He's a young man by the name of Andrea. Andrea has had a kind of rough life, to be honest with you. When I first moved into this apartment building, I should say removed, because I had been away for a while, but then I moved back in. He had just been married to a young woman by the name of Loredana. Loredana, a few months into their relationship, announced that she had actually become infatuated with another man and was no longer interested in being exclusive to him. By that stage, they actually had 2 small children. And more than that, Loredana said that she also didn't think it fair that she had to move out of the apartment, so that she was going to invite her new boyfriend to live with them in their apartment. Andrea, being the sweet guy that he is, agreed to that. Further, he agreed to take over primary responsibility for raising their very small children, because divorce in Italy takes a long time. She's not quite his ex-wife yet, but his separated partner, in any event, was not interested in providing child care. And so Andrea would work his doorman's job from 7:30 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. He would then go off and work a handyman's job from 2 until about 10. He would make sure that there were time that he had a break where he could pick his kids up from school, get them home. He would make sure he had another break where he could go home and feed them. And he is still doing this, and he does it day in and day out. He, too, has a holy card of Padre Pio in his wallet. And every day he takes it out to pray to Padre Pio for the strength to keep going. Now, what is it about this Capuchin figure that would stir the soul of the prime minister of the 3rd largest economy in Europe, the motherland of human civilization in many ways, and a commonplace blue-collar doorman who's just trying to get through the day and do the best he can by his kids despite an objectively horrific situation? I think what it is that both of them understand that in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the Capuchins, there is no difference among them. Yes, they have different work. They find themselves in different places in life. But they are equally sons of God, trying to do the best they can by their lights. And in terms of the Capuchins, who provide pastoral care for them, and whose spiritual testimony, whose spiritual example is their lodestar, they know in their bones that those Capuchins make no distinctions between the two of them. Truly, this is not just verbiage from a constitution from centuries ago, ladies and gentlemen. Without distinction is the beating heart of the Capuchin ethos. The other story I will tell you, again, involves Brother Mark and involves his election as the provincial minister. We heard earlier about church law and the Code of Canon Law. The Code of Canon Law, and Kim, I'm sorry, I don't know where you are at the moment. It does not actually say that a brother cannot be elected provincial minister. What Canon 129 of the Code of Canon Law actually says is that in order to possess the power of governance in the church, you have to be ordained. You have to be clergy, meaning that it is, canonically speaking, illegal for a non-ordained person to possess the power of governance, to possess jurisdiction over an ordained person. And this has been tested at various points over the centuries, and it has always been upheld by Rome. Now, when the Capuchins of Mid-America elected Mark Schenck their provincial minister, they had many reasons for doing so. First of all, Mark is one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my entire life. Secondly, Secondly, he is whip smart. Third, despite what he told you about his ignorance of Rome, this is, and I am sorry to out you in this regard, Mark, a bald-faced lie. His experience working in the Capuchin Generalate in Rome over a stretch of some years gave him a vast and critically valuable perspective on the global dimension of the Catholic Church. And ladies and gentlemen, need I remind you that in the early 21st century, we live in a church in which 2/3 of the 1.3 billion Catholics in the world live outside the West, and the 70 million Catholics in the United States represent exactly 6% of the global Catholic population. Another way of putting that point is that 94% of the Catholics in the world are not like us. And if we want to function effectively in the church of our time, we need to know something about those other Catholics. We need to know what it means to be Catholic in Bahrain and in Bangladesh and in Dubai and in Congo and so many other points beyond. And Mark brings that kind of perspective. But I think equally, it was important to the Capuchins in America to make a statement. They wanted to make a statement that in our order, in our family, there are no distinctions. That cleric or lay, man or woman, white or black, these are considerations for the outside world, but they are not considerations for us. And they, if I may invoke Star Trek, they decided to boldly go where no one has gone before, and they elected a lay brother as their provincial minister. And Brother Mark had the great good grace to be elected to that position in an era in which we have a pope named Francis, who himself believes in his bones that there are no distinctions in the eyes of God. And so upon hearing the news of Brother Mark's election and being faced with the choice of whether to approve it or not, he approved it. Brother Mark, you are much more than a statement. You are a flesh and blood human being, and you're one of the finest flesh and blood human beings that I have ever known. But you are also a statement about what the Capuchins are about, and God bless you for it. Finally, a personal note. You heard Father Charles Polifka earlier tell you that he was the principal of Thomas More Prep Marian High School when I attended the school in the early 80s. What Father Charles did not tell you, because he is far too sweet a man, is that I was the only student, at least up to that point, to have earned the distinction of being burned in effigy by the faculty. I was a bit of a holy terror. I was the only child of an only child. I was spoiled beyond belief. I also had the misfortune of being a reasonably smart young man, and that, of course, gave me a sense of personal infallibility that the faculty at TMP Marian, I think, found a little difficult to cope with at various points. I will tell you this. To the extent that I have overcome any of that, and that is a work in progress. Major combat operations are not over. It is a daily struggle. But to the extent that I have become a humbler, kinder, more responsible, more honest human being, it is, to a great extent, due to the influence of the Capuchin Franciscans in my life. And I will never, ever stop being grateful to you for it. So you ask me, was it a sacrifice? Was it a sacrifice to be here tonight, flying over from Rome and having to fly back at the crack of dawn tomorrow morning in the middle of the biggest Vatican story of the year? Sure. Is there anyone else on the planet I would have done it for? No. But ladies and gentlemen, these are the Capuchins. They have changed my life. They have changed your lives. They asked, and I said yes. And they are asking all of you tonight, and I invite you to join me in saying yes. Thank you, and God bless you.